The Kybalion, a conversation by Julie Benetti and Susan Barbaro, is a production of EI Publishing in association with EI Alliance, copyright 2018. Visit eipublishing.com for more. Music for this series is courtesy of New Threads, copyright 2018, from their self-titled album, available now.
Hi, this is Susan Barbaro.
And I'm Julie Benetti.
And we're here to continue our discussion on the Kybalion. And in this podcast, we're going to be talking about the principle of polarity. So to quote the Kybalion, everything is dual, everything has poles, everything has its pair of opposites. Like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. Extremes meet. All truths are but half-truths, and all paradoxes may be reconciled. So this basically tells us that everything just has two poles. It explains that everything are just mere degrees different from each other. So here, there, vibration. So that's all there is to say. We're done.
And that was a very good explanation of it. That really is what it is in a nutshell.
So, I mean, the average person, I think, can understand that if in one of the examples they give is hot and cold, I mean, you can see that those are both the same thing, but they different in degrees.
So they're both same as temperature, yeah.
Right. So they're the same thing, and that's an easy thing to understand because the difference is in temperature. And
I think there's a real clarity to this when you look at it and say, okay, great. So you're talking about big, little, skinny, fat, old, young. You're looking at opposites. Yet, the funny thing about it is the real gist of the explanation is that there's extremes and opposites, yet all the many varying degrees between them is what makes them extremes and opposites.
Right, but that everything can be reconciled, because if when is tall no longer tall and when is short no longer short. You go to extreme, but really what is the extreme? What is short? You can continue to go shorter and shorter and shorter and taller and taller and taller. But yet, you can come back to when is tall no longer tall. And it moves into, well, not tall, but it's
less
not
tall.
Short.
Right.
Yeah. So it's really, if you look at it in a scale, I mean, it's the same thing with, I'm even looking at the book to try to come up with different examples of what they give, that light and darkness. Yeah. Light, what is the extreme of light? I mean, is it when the sun's at, 12 o'clock noon, high noon, or is it in the morning when the sun seems the brightest? What is the extreme of light and what is the extreme of darkness? And really, they are one but the same, except varying degrees.
And also, one of the cool questions it asks in the book is, where does darkness leave off and light begin?
Right. So the interesting part about this is, for the first time you read it, it's like, yeah, duh, of course, that makes sense. You can, when you understand it that way. And the thing that I think we're trying to do, especially with these podcasts, is you start off with yeah, of course, that makes sense to me. And then, of course, you build upon it. So then if we're going to take what we've been talking about and now go a little bit further, we go into, again, what the Kybalion talks about is love and hate. They are extremes of the same. And so, okay, so you're going to say, well, okay, so we'll go in that. And at what point do you really hate? At what point do you really love? And what point do you not hate? And then you don't mind. And at what point do you move from love to like, and then not like, then have no opinion? You can reason that away as well, that there are two extremes, is love and hate. And you can't even define the extreme of love and the extreme of hate, yet along the way, there's all these different versions of it. And at what point, they're gray. There's no hard, fast lines dictating what degrees they are. They all kind of merge.
And the cool thing about this principle, the principle of polarity, is that it allows you to distinguish that everything has duality. And in the duality concept of these things, the specific degrees between them um, are important because you can utilize, because for example, when you feel love, I mean, when you feel love, when you're really angry, you're really angry, and it's really hard to get out of anger when you're really, really angry. And you have a temper and you feel strongly about something, it's very hard to get out of it. Yet that's why in this principle, the most important thing is not only does it distinguish the duality, but it sets up in distinguishing the duality that in that paradox, in the polarity paradox, it's a principle that you can utilize to move from one to the other.
So okay, so Julie, you always talk so high level, and I always try to bring it down to something that works. So, from what I understand from reading this and talking, is that once you understand that everything is simply a degree of its opposite,
Mm.
knowing that, it's almost like, it's like temperature. If you're dealing with temperature and you get a thermometer, well, now you can work on the temperature. You can move the temperature up or down, whatever it is. Same thing with love and hate. If you understand you're at hate, again, and I laugh because I don't even think we can distinguish what hate is and distinguish what love is, but we'll just take that for. And if you're at hate and you understand you're on that same line, I'll call it, as love, well, if you have access to one, you clearly have access to the other. So that's the first thing that you can't escape. If you understand this principle, you cannot say, oh, I just have hate. Well, you have access to love. No, I don't. Well, that doesn't make sense. You're on that line. Of course you do.
And because of the principle of polarity, because of the principle of polarity, you automatically, if you're in hate, you have love.
Right. And so the second part of this is that, what do you do with that? And so I guess, then it goes back to the principle of mentalism. I'm sounding pretty good, like I'm getting this, so right? So you go to mentalism, it becomes a choice. And you may sit there and say, I hate somebody because they did something that just absolutely gets me so angry. And I've been in that space, and I know everybody else has, until you sit back and you know what's really driving them. It has nothing to do with you. Even if it was directed at you, if you know that, if someone came and gave you the finger, you're driving in the car and they give you the finger, and you're like, oh, I'm going to, you don't realize that they gave you the finger. They're giving the finger to everybody they drive by. It's just them. It's got nothing to do with you. Not that it's going to make you go from, I hate them, to, oh, I love them. But the hate you can move from that a little bit, and you start moving on that line. And then it becomes a choice. Do you want to stay in? I hate them. I'm angry. And then there's something more. You know the truth, but you choose not to embrace that. You choose, nope, they got me angry, and that's where I'm going to stay, and I'm not moving from it. And you're stubborn. And most people do that.
And what's funny about that, because that's a Seinfeld episode where George is driving and somebody gives him the middle finger, and actually, not to ruin the great episode, but he ends up, I think, driving all the way to New Jersey in crazy anger to go, how dare he do that? And come to find out, the guy had his hand in a cast and was just putting it up, and he had broken some fingers, so he had no idea. Yet the beauty of that is, I'll say, you went right to the principle of mentalism. If you don't skip over the principle of vibration, once again, so you take the love and the hate and the anger and George's anger in that example from Seinfeld, and how it peters out. He drives all the way from Manhattan to somewhere in New Jersey, furious to tell this guy off, ends up at a gas station, and by that time he's already petered out. And he gets out and he sees the guy in the cast and goes, oh. And so the funny thing about that is, when you go to vibration and you think about hot and cold, and you think about what it takes, even when we talked about in the vibration episode, what it takes to get warm is you got to move. And so there you are, increasing your vibration. So when you think about that in temperature and duality, and then you take it into the polarity principle, and how to move. You know, you think about that great example that I always go to at the Museum of Science in Boston. They used to have this huge pendulum, I think they still do, that swings back and forth. And any pendulum you can picture swinging back and forth. When it gets to its extreme, it's going to eventually come back the other way. And in the duality, those two extremes exist there, and all those points in between are the degrees.
So the one thing, though, that of course I go to with this is that having that awareness and having the understanding of it, you have the ability to affect yourself. I mean, people talk about, how do I get out of hate, and or how do I get over a love that I've loved? How it's not a how do I get over it. You just let you move with the vibration and with the pendulum, and what the we're going to talk in the future podcast, but it talks about when you come into some place and how your vibration affects your polarity, which can at the end of the day affect other people
right
around you,
and how you can use that to change the way other people are around you, which is really cool and part of the Hermetic teachings as well. And
that's ultimately, but the basic is, sometimes these principles are great because they're very basic, and then of course it builds upon it and it builds upon it, and then it gets to like, whoa, wait a minute, let me grasp my but it's a process that you can move towards. And that's basically the principle of polarity in itself.
Right, exactly, which is a good point. And it's funny because even if you go to the simplicity of a beginning and an ending, I mean, they're two extremes, yet they're so close when something begins and something ends. And it's like light and dark and everything that we said in the principle of polarity, where it's just two terms applied to two poles of the same thing. It becomes a real tangible brilliance that you can work with.
And what's important, and I'm trying to find it, is they talk about the polarity is in varying degrees of the same thing. So it's not varying degrees. I can't go from hate to being less hungry.
Right.
You can't go from it because it doesn't work that way, because they're not on the same line. I don't know what else to call that, but the same plane.
Well, if you say, what do you feel like eating for dinner? You want Chinese food or Italian food? And, I don't even say this, but if someone says, oh, I hate Chinese food, well, it doesn't mean they're still not hungry. You're still going to have dinner. Right.
And so I think that's important.
So it's kind of like the same mode or the same theme, I guess.
Yeah, I was trying to find it, but...
yeah, that's a good point to bring up.
So, and then the other side of it is... So once like you said, the Hermetists, the way that that at least from what I've read, that I understand, I don't know any that I'm aware of, and I don't want to speak to that, but is that they've been very adept at changing their vibration, and their changing from one extreme to another, and then the better that they've become. Again, they can actually change the vibration, and in others. And what I'm wondering is that, so it actually, when you're with somebody, and their vibration is different than yours. So this is an important piece, and I just want to make sure I say it correctly. If you're around someone and their vibration is such that it's at a higher level, and I think of gurus, people go to a guru and they go there and they feel really good, because the guru in their mental state is so firm in what they believe that positive, I'm going to call it positive polarity, can transmute everyone around them. And that's wonderful. However, if you do not learn to do it for yourself, when you leave, you go back. And then what happens is then you need to go back to the guru to feel that way. And then you leave, and it goes away, and you become a habitual. It's almost like a drug.
Right.
You continue to go, and it's interesting because they talk here that it goes from the person figures out for themselves, and then they can do it for others. And yet I'm going to ask the question. It's easy sometimes to do it for others. It's easy for me to tell somebody why they should feel good. Yet doing it for myself is more the challenge. I mean, we've figured it out, but I think that's actually an interest. I think the perspective for today, because this was written in the early 1900s. I mean,
Right.
we're in the the 21st century, and I think actually it's interesting that it's almost the opposite. And I started feeling that when we were doing the other podcast, and I was saying about vibration, about raising vibration, and not. It's like that was what they said. Yet I think there's something different to that. I'm not ready to go into that yet, but when I think about this, people go to the quote guru because they have the ability to transmute your energy to a more positive one, because people go in there and they're
Well,
angry, whatever.
it's also why people go to concerts and they do things that they like, because they won't, maybe they don't know that, they're not aware of it, but it raises their vibration. That raises, they have endorphins or whatever, you get a like
Yep.
from,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna, from any social media out there, I'm not gonna name any, but you get,
Yeah.
oh, I get a like, somebody likes my post. I mean, a little endorphin, you get some endorphins from that, you get something from that, it becomes
So
biological. So that's the changing of the vibration. That's all true and part of it. And I think I get where you're saying this. Yet it's also something, yes, you have to do for yourself. And understanding the duality and the existence of the duality, yes, you can better understand your own mental state and those of other people. And then you start getting that everything, these states are just a matter of degree. And so not only can you move within them, but others can as well. And it's not that you have to walk outside and start moving people from their states of degrees of duality at all. Yet you can raise and lower your vibration to whatever works for you. You can change your mental state. And that's, again, then they go into that's a form of mental alchemy and
I
blah,
just
blah,
sit
blah.
there at the end of the day. To me, what's the most important is really you being able to change your own state. And it's actually the inverse of what we're saying. I'm not interested in going out and changing other people's states, because who am I to make that decision? However, I think the important thing is, again, the opposite, that I do not fall victim to someone else's state, because some people are really angry or very fearful or whatever, and they are so steadfast in that belief that they can actually transmute other people's states.
Right.
And I think the important thing is not so much that I can go out and change people's state of mind, because that really is irresponsibility on my end, because now I'm trying to make people dependent on me, which is really doesn't benefit me, nor does it benefit them. Yet, if I have the awareness to not fall victim to someone else's state, so I read this differently.
Right.
So it's fascinating. I'm not, and so that's what a guru does, goes in and changes everyone's states. And because they're so dead on in what they believe that you can't pierce that. And that's great for them, but that doesn't help the people that they quote think they're helping, because now they become dependent. It's like the drug. Whereas you teach somebody how to take care of themselves. It's the old adage of, instead of giving someone a fish to eat, they eat for a night. You teach them how to fish so they can eat for a lifetime. And I think there's something different to that polarity. It's just as powerful. I'm not denying, and it's my interpretation. It's my interpretation. And as the 21st century, I think some of this interpretation it needs to be changed a little bit, even from what's been written and the way that we view it. Not that the principles change.
Well, it needs the part that needs to be elevated, once again, as we say, from everything, from energetic invocations, from everything we do, that you need to do the work. And it's up to you to do the work, and you need to get that you're not a servant or slave to your mental state, but you're an active participant. And it goes all the way back to principle of mentalism, vibration, of correspondence. It goes back to all of these, and you're the active. I mean, it goes all the way back. You jump to mentalism, yet it goes already all the way back to that. We're all connected. We're the all, and it goes into that huge realm of, what is this as a mental state? And once again, this is a tactic and a tool to not only be aware, but get, the duality, and then get that there's more to it. It's degrees, and to stay with that.
Cool.
And to move with that.
All right, well, we'll be talking to you soon. Enjoy. Thank you.
This has been a production of EI Publishing in association with EI Alliance. Listen to other episodes and visit eipublishing.com for the transcript of this series as an ebook, and to find more energized podcasts and books. Find New Threads' self-titled album, New Threads, on iTunes, Spotify, Bandcamp, or at newthreads.us. Thank you for listening.